What happens when two powerhouse women in music sit down for what's supposed to be a friendly chat? But old wounds and industry secrets begin to surface. The result can be explosive. What unfolded that day on the Kelly Clarkson Show quickly became one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history. Simple interview that spiraled into a confrontation so tense it ended with a guest storming off set. Asterisk. The atmosphere in the studio was electric from the start. Gwen Stefani walked in with her signature confidence, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled, and her black and white ensemble radiating both elegance and edge. The audience erupted in applause as she took her seat across from Kelly Clarkson, who greeted her guest with a broad, genuine smile. It was meant to be a celebration, the reunion of sorts between two women who had both carved their names into music history. Asterisk, Gwen. It is so incredible to have you here, Kelly began warmly. I've been a fan since the No Doubt days, and watching your evolution as an artist has been absolutely inspiring. Gwen smiled politely and replied, "Thank you." Kelly, that means a lot coming from someone with your talent and success. There was a subtle coolness in her tone that only the most observant viewers might have caught. But the excitement in the room kept the energy high. Asterisk, the conversation started smoothly, covering Gwen's many transformations from ska punk frontwoman to pop icon to fashion mogul. Kelly praised her reinvention, asking what drove her constant evolution. Evolution is survival in this industry, Gwen replied, her fingers lightly drumming on the armrest. You adapt, or you become irrelevant. I've always believed in pushing boundaries, even when people don't understand or appreciate it at first. Asterisk, for several minutes. Everything seemed fine as they discussed Gwen's current projects, her fashion line, and her role as a coach on various singing competitions. But beneath the surface, tension was quietly building. Kelly's questions began to take a sharper, more personal turn. You know, Gwen, she said carefully, I have to ask about something that's been on my mind. Throughout your career, you've worked with some incredible artists, but some of those relationships seem to have ended on complicated terms. Asterisk, Gwen's posture shifted almost imperceptibly, her composure tightening. Relationships in this industry are complex. Kelly, creative partnerships can be intense, and sometimes they run their course. That's just the nature of the business. Asterisk, but don't you think there's a pattern there? Kelly pressed, her tone edging toward confrontational. When you look at the history, the departures from your band, to collaborations that ended abruptly, the public disagreements sat, what point do you start looking inward? Asterisk, the audience sensed the shift instantly. The friendly banter had turned into something much more serious. Gwen's smile stayed fixed, but her eyes hardened. That's a rather bold statement to make, Kelly, she said evenly, especially coming from someone who's had their own share of industry challenges and public scrutiny. Asterisk, Kelly didn't back down. I'm not trying to attack you, Gwen. I'm genuinely curious about the narrative that seems to follow your career, the idea that you're difficult to work with, that you're demanding or controlling. These aren't my words. They're from people who've worked with you. Asterisk, demanding, Gwen repeated, her voice rising slightly. Is that what we call a woman who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to fight for her vision? Because I find it interesting that when a man does the same thing, he's called a perfectionist or a visionary. But when a woman does it, she's labeled difficult. Asterisk, the tension in the room was now undeniable. Kelly leaned back slightly, perhaps realizing she had touched a nerve, but she didn't retreat. That's a fair point about gender double standards in the industry, she conceded. But I'm talking about specific situations, specific people who've spoken about their experiences working with you. Asterisk, Gwen laughed sharply, her tone cutting through the air like a blade. Specific people. Are we really going to sit here and relitigate every professional decision I've made over a 30-year career? Because if that's what this interview is about, Kelly, Maybe you should have been more upfront about your intentions. Asterisk, the studio fell silent. The audience, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented, held its breath. What had begun as a light-hearted celebrity interview had transformed into a raw, unfiltered confrontation. One that would soon dominate headlines and redefine both women's on-air personas. Asterisk Kelly's voice took on a firmer tone as she tried to steady the spiraling conversation. "My intentions are to have an honest conversation," she said, her usual warmth replaced by a measured calm. "I think our viewers deserve authenticity, not just the sanitized version of celebrity that we usually get in these settings." Gwen shifted in her chair, her posture stiffening as a spark of defiance flashed in her eyes. "Authenticity?" she repeated, standing slightly. "You want to talk about authenticity, Kelly? Let's talk about authenticity." Her words cut through the tense air, her voice low but charged with emotion. "You want authenticity? Then let's be real. Let's talk about how you've built your entire brand on being the relatable, down-to-earth girl next door while undermining other women in this industry behind closed doors." Asterisk Kelly's face went pale, her confident demeanor cracking for the first time. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Gwen. I've always supported other female artists." Gwen let out a bitter laugh, all traces of politeness gone. "Have you? Because I've heard some very interesting stories about what you've said in private meetings and boardrooms where you thought no one would ever repeat your words. Should we share those with your audience?" The room went dead silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the cameras. Behind them, Kelly's production crew exchanged panicked glances, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. The studio audience sat frozen, watching the confrontation unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Asterisk, Kelly's training kicked in, and she tried to regain control. "Gwen, I think you might be misunderstanding something. If someone told you I said something negative about you, maybe we should discuss this privately after the show." But Gwen was already standing, her full height casting a shadow over Kelly's desk. "You want privacy now?" she demanded, her voice shaking with anger. "Where was that concern for privacy when you were spreading rumors about my personal life during my divorce? When you were whispering to executives about how unstable I was? How unreliable?" Kelly's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, her expression stricken. "I would never. I've never done anything like that." "Gwen, you're clearly upset about something, but I think you're misdirecting your anger." Asterisk misdirecting. Gwen's voice rose, sharp and explosive. "Kelly, I have receipts. I have witnesses. I have recordings of phone calls where you laughed about my marriage falling. A part where you said I was just a wife trying to stay relevant through my relationships." The color drained completely from Kelly's face. "That's not I mean. If I said something that was taken out of context, I apologize," she stammered. "But I would never intentionally hurt another artist." Asterisk taken out of context. Gwen's laugh was bitter and disbelieving as she began pacing behind her chair like a caged animal. How do you take calling someone a desperate attention seeker out of context? How do you misinterpret telling a record executive that I was past my prime and that they should focus on newer, more stable talent? Kelly looked toward her producers off camera, her eyes pleading, but they were just as frozen as the rest of the room. "Gwen, please, let's just take a breath here," Kelly said weakly. "I think there's been some kind of miscommunication." Asterisk the only miscommunication, Gwen snapped, pointing an accusatory finger at her host. "Is that I trusted people who told me you were different? That you were one of the good ones? That you actually supported other women instead of just pretending to for your image?" Kelly's eyes were watery now, her composure breaking completely. "I am supportive of other women," she said, her voice trembling. "My entire show is built around uplifting people celebrating their achievements." Asterisk Gwen didn't flinch. "Your show is built around making yourself look good, she shot back coldly. You bring people on here. Ask them softball questions. Make them feel comfortable and grateful. And then you go behind their backs and tear them down to anyone who'll listen. It's the most insidious kind of betrayal because nobody sees it coming. Asterisk, the silence that followed was suffocating. The audience was utterly stillsome, covering their mouths in disbelief. Others leaning forward, unable to look away from the chaos unraveling before them. In that moment, the polished facade of daytime television shattered completely, leaving only raw emotion and the wreckage of two powerful women's reputations on live television. Kelly tried one last time to salvage what had become an irreparable disaster. "Gwen, I understand you're hurt by something," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. "And if I played any role in that hurt, I am truly sorry. But the person you're describing, that's not who I am. That's not who I've ever been." Gwen stopped pacing and fixed Kelly with a stare so sharp it could have cut glass. "Do you know what the worst part is, Kelly?" she asked, her tone cold and deliberate. "It's not even that you said those things about me. It's that you said them with such conviction, such certainty. Like you actually believed you were doing the industry a favor by trying to push me out." Asterisk, I have never tried to push anyone out of anything, Kelly replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Gwen's eyes narrowed. "No. Then explain to me why 3 different labels suddenly became hesitant to work with me after private conversations with you. Explain why collaborations that were practically finalized mysteriously fell apart. After you had dinner with the right executives, explain why my name started getting dropped from projects right after you began your little campaign of concern, whispering about my so-called mental state." Asterisk, Kelly's hands were trembling now, her voice weak but defensive. "Gwen, you're painting me as some kind of master manipulator, and that's just not accurate. If business decisions were made that affected you, I had nothing to do with them." Gwen's voice rose suddenly, sharp and cutting. "Nothing to do with them? Kelly, have a recording of you telling a Sony executive that working with me would be a liability because of my personal problems. Would you like me to play it right here, right now?" Asterisk, the threat hung in the air like a live wire. Kelly's eyes darted around the studio, her panic barely concealed. "I don't know what recording you think you have, but I have never called anyone a liability," she said shakily. "Oh, but you did," Gwen snapped, pulling out her phone with theatrical flair. "You want authenticity. You want honesty? Fine. Let's give your audience the real Kelly Clarkson, the one behind the cameras, not the one they've been spoon-fed." Asterisk, Kelly shot up from her chair so quickly it nearly toppled over. "You can't just play private conversations on television," she said urgently. "There are legal issues, consent laws." Gwen cut her off with a scathing laugh. "Now you're worried about consent. Where was that concern when you were sharing private details about my life with people who had no business knowing them?" The air in the studio felt heavy, charged with tension so thick it was almost visible. Asterisk, Kelly pressed her trembling hands flat against her desk, her knuckles white as she struggled to hold herself together. Gwen stood opposite her, unwavering, her phone clutched like a weapon. "You know what, Gwen?" Kelly said suddenly, her tone shifting from panic to defiance. "Maybe I did say those things. Maybe I did have conversations about your stability, your reliability. But you know what? I wasn't wrong, was I? Look at what you're doing right now. Look at how you're behaving on national television." Asterisk, a collective gasp swept through the audience like a gust of wind. Kelly's words were gasoline, and Gwen was the match. Gwen's face hardened, her expression turning from fury to something darker, vindication mixed with cold disbelief. "There it is," she said slowly. "There's the real Kelly Clarkson, the one who hides behind her wholesome image while destroying other women's careers." Asterisk, I didn't destroy your career, Kelly shot back, her voice rising. Your career destroyed itself. The erratic behavior, the public meltdowns, the constant drama. I just refused to pretend it wasn't happening. Gwen's laugh was sharp and humorless. Erratic behavior, she repeated. You mean going through a divorce like millions of other women? Having the audacity to keep working while my personal life was falling apart? Or was it erratic because I didn't quietly disappear and make room for the next generation like you thought I should? Kelly rose to her full height, matching Gwen's energy. I thought you should get help, she said fiercely. I thought you should take care of yourself instead of dragging everyone around you into your chaos. Gwen slammed her palm down on the desk so hard that Kelly's coffee mug rattled and jumped. My chaos, she repeated, her voice booming across the silent room. You want to talk about chaos, Kelly? Let's talk about your divorce. Let's talk about the custody battles, the accusations, the messy financial disputes. But when it's your life falling apart, suddenly it's a brave journey of self-discovery. When it's mine, it's chaos that needs to be contained. The hypocrisy hung in the air like a toxic fog. Kelly's face flushed crimson, her composure shattered. That's completely different, she snapped. I handled my situation with dignity. Gwen's voice dripped with disdain. Dignity. Is that what you call airing your dirty laundry in interviews for sympathy? Is that what you call using your platform to paint yourself as the victim, while your ex-husband couldn't defend himself without looking like the villain? I never used my platform to hurt anyone, Kelly said, but her voice lacked conviction. Gwen stepped closer, her tone low and merciless. No, you just used your influence to whisper poison in the right ears. You've planted seeds of doubt about other women's capabilities. You positioned yourself as a stable alternative, while the rest of us were painted as unstable. Kelly's producer finally stepped forward, signaling frantically for a commercial break. But the two women didn't even glance his way. They were far beyond the reach of control now. This wasn't television anymore, it was a reckoning. Gwen's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You know what your problem is, Kelly? You've gotten so comfortable being America's sweetheart that you forgot other people are human beings too. You forgot that your words have consequences, that your opinions carry weight, that your casual cruelty can destroy lives. Casual cruelty. Kelly echoed, her voice cracking. I've never been cruel. I've never tried to hurt anyone deliberately. Gwen's expression hardened as she pulled something up on her phone, her fingers steady and sure. Haven't you? Because I have a text from a mutual friend, someone who was in the room when you said, and I quote, Gwen Stefani is a cautionary tale about what happens when women in this industry don't know when to step back gracefully. The words hit Kelly like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her face draining of color. That's not your taking that out of context, she stammered, weakly. Gwen's eyes burned with fury. What context makes that okay, Kelly? What context makes it acceptable for one woman to decide when another woman's time is up? What gave you the right to determine my career, my relevance, my worth in this industry? Kelly opened and closed her mouth, searching for words that wouldn't come. I was just people were asking my opinion, she managed finally. Everyone has opinions about everyone in this business. Everyone doesn't have your platform, Gwen fired back. Everyone doesn't have your influence. Everyone doesn't get invited to those private dinners where careers are made and destroyed over dessert and casual conversation. Her voice rose to a crescendo, each word landing like a hammer. The studio was silent, the air thick with the weight of decades of resentment, truth, and betrayal finally breaking loose. Kelly's voice trembled as she tried to find her footing in the storm she had created. I never meant for any of this to hurt you, she said weakly, but even to her own ears, the words rang hollow. Gwen's response came like a thunderclap. "You never meant for it to hurt me," she repeated, her voice rising to a pitch that seemed to vibrate through the entire studio. "You systematically undermined my reputation, my professional relationships, my ability to work in my own industry, and you never meant for it to hurt me. What exactly did you think would happen?" Kelly's eyes darted frantically around the studio, seeking help from her producers, the audience, anyone who might offer her a lifeline, but all she found were faces frozen in disbelief and disappointment. The wholesome, beloved image she had carefully built for years was crumbling right before everyone's eyes. I believed you were already successful," Kelly stammered, her words tripping over one another in desperation. "You didn't need what?" Gwen shot back sharply. "Respect. Support from my peers. The basic courtesy of not being sabotaged by someone I considered a colleague." Gwen was magnificent in her fury, a force of nature that could neither be contained nor reasoned with. Kelly's voice softened to a pleading whisper. "Gwen, please. Can we find a way to move past this?" Gwen stared at her for a long, tense moment, her chest rising and falling as she fought to keep her rage in check. When she finally spoke, her words were quiet but laced with steel. "Move past this, Kelly. You don't get to destroy someone's career and then ask them to move past it because it's becoming inconvenient for you. You don't get to play the victim when your own actions are exposed." Slowly, Gwen began gathering her things, her movements deliberate and calm, in sharp contrast to the chaos that filled the room. The studio was so silent that the soft rustle of her clothes and the click of her heels echoed like thunderclaps. "This interview is over," she said firmly, slinging her purse over her shoulder. "And Kelly, the next time you want to have an authentic conversation about someone's career, maybe start by taking a long, hard look at your own behavior." She turned to leave but paused at the edge of the set, glancing back over her shoulder with a look that mixed pity and disgust. "You know what's really sad about all this?" she said quietly. "I actually used to respect you. I thought you were different. I thought you were better than the mean girls who usually run this industry. But you're not different at all. You're just better at hiding it." With that final, devastating blow, Gwen Stefani walked off the Kelly Clarkson Show, her heels striking the studio floor like a countdown to Kelly's professional unraveling. The audience sat frozen in stunned silence, the air heavy with disbelief. Kelly slowly sank back into her chair, burying her face in her hands as the weight of what had just happened crashed over her. The wreckage of her carefully crafted image lay scattered around her like shards of broken glass. And so ended one of the most shocking moments in daytime television history, an interview that began as a cordial conversation and ended in a public reckoning that left reputations shattered and friendships obliterated. The fallout would ripple far beyond that studio. Was Gwen justified in her accusations, or did she go too far? Audiences everywhere would debate it endlessly. But one thing was certain: nothing about this confrontation would ever be forgotten.